Good evening, everybody. I'm Jazz Tankay, Senior Audience Editor at Variety. Oh my God, how incredible was this season of The Last of Us? Well, I'm so excited and honored to be here today because, like you, The Last of Us is one of my favorite shows of the season. And so let me just run through the format for tonight. So I'm going to bring out the incredible artisans behind the show, and we're going to have a quick conversation. And then you'll be treated to a screening of episode 2. And then there'll be another Q&A with the cast of the show. So without further ado, I want you to give them a huge round of applause as I call them out. Please welcome composer David Fleming, editor Timothy Good, VFX supervisor Alex Wang, production designer Don MacAulay, costume designer Anne Foley, director of photography Ksenia Sereda, co-creator, executive producer, writer, and director Craig Mazin, and co-creator, executive producer, writer, and director Neil Druckmann.
I beat you.
Love it, love it, love it.
I just did what everyone else did because these guys are really good at their jobs. I thought they would know.
You follow the department heads, right? Like, that's how it goes.
Always.
First of all, huge congratulations on this season. Yes. There's some incredible artisan work that happened. And Alex, I'm looking directly at you because, my God, your work was phenomenal. The bloater was so great to see, and I think it was a technical marvel, and I could spend the next 30 minutes hearing about the how you put it all together. But what was the creative brief for you?
For just a bloater?
The bloater, yeah.
Well, the creative brief was, we're not going to do this practically. We're going to do it all CG this time. We had probably 5 shots in season 1 of the bloater, and they were very difficult. We have 40 this season in just a battle, right? So the bloater was featured from head to toe in all the shots, and in daylight, there's just nothing to hide. In the cul-de-sac for season 1, it's nighttime, there's firelight. There's some things that you can hide your sins in that kind of lighting. For the Battle of Jackson and the bloater, there's just nothing you couldn't hide at anywhere. So, and it had to be photoreal. And the challenging part was also just this creature that obviously doesn't look human-like, but you have infected running around the bloater, which look human-like. So it had to be in place. It couldn't feel like it's suddenly out of place. So these are all the challenges that we had for the brief that we had to attack early on and prep in the shoot and in post.
And then we told you to light it on fire.
Oh, yes, yeah.
And burn it slowly.
Yeah. Yes, so that was a whole different challenge. That was very dear to Craig and Neil and made me very nervous. But yeah, so we started R&D on that very early on. And the first thing that Craig said, it's like, in Ghostbusters, the Marshmallow Man, when he burned. So I actually watched that, and I'm like, really, Craig?
Yeah, it's a great movie, and it's very successful.
Yeah, no. So a lot of R&D, we started looking at a lot of reference because we wanted it to be grounded. Like the burning, it's all about the subtleties and the details of how that skin burns and bubbles and melts. And we wanted it to be a journey between Tommy and the bloater. And it couldn't feel like it was too easy, and it couldn't feel like it was too hard.
Craig, what was it like when you saw Alex's work come together?
Well, Alex and I travel from the very beginning to the very end together. So of all the people that work on things, I think Alex is probably the one that is there right at the beginning, early, and is all the way there to the very last minute. The very last minute of season 2 was in my house on a Sunday approving a shot that HBO was screaming at us to drop in so that it would be on the air. So I watch all of this with him. But what I appreciate about Alex is that he will save me the pain of a lot of stuff in between the things I see. And we do very much share a mind, and we'll sit and we'll also work with Neil like on just like some basic character design stuff, because you've gone through this, like, like, okay, this is why the bloater just looks sort of tired and broken down right now. It's because of this line and this line. And so we work together on these things, but in a kind of, and I complain about this to Alex all the time. He's like, this is how it goes. It doesn't really come together until like the very end, like the last 10% of the time is where suddenly it just blossoms into real. And then it is so exciting. So it's invigorating, and we're afraid and nervous, but no one is more dedicated than Alex, and we're incredibly lucky to have him.
Love that. It's, as I said, it is a technical marvel. Dan, your sets this season. Oh, yes. Go ahead and applaud for Dan. So in season 1, we were in Jackson, Wyoming. In season 2, talk about, your approach to the sets and what needed to be different and working on location.
Well, we shot in Canmore, obviously, in the first season, so it was a location that was very difficult to prep in. It was almost like prepping a Main Street Disneyland, because it was a holiday weekend and there were people everywhere. And, there were people running over in our tents where our saws were working. It was a disaster. So, and we knew going into this one, we were going to have a massive battle. And it was just not possible to do it on location. So it was a big build, and it grew as we got into the battle. And we knew, basically there was IP issues as well. We wanted to make sure we were contained enough and people weren't seeing what we were doing. So it was a massive backlot build, 40 buildings, several blocks, and then Alex took over, and we also had interiors and things done as well. And when Mark showed up to do the battle in particular, it sort of grew a little bit more, and we finished rooftops, and we did, retrofitting of windows and interiors to get all the specific shots, and, the fence and how the bloater came through the wall, all that stuff had to be sorted out. So it was an ambitious build, but it was successful, I think.
Did you go ahead, Craig?
And then you tore it down.
And then we tore it down.
It's so stupid, because it would be like a great theme park. Like people could go visit Jackson in that gravel pit. It's a destination holiday? No? Fine.
Maybe next season you're just not going to turn your, close your sets down or burn them, and you can have.
Yeah, we got a real problem with that. We tend to do that. We tend to light things on fire, smash them, tear them down. Although, well, I don't want to talk about next season too much.
No. We're not going to talk about next season. We're not talking about
no.
It's more of a water season than a fire season.
It's a wetter season than a hotter season. Yeah. Sorry.
There you go. Anne, can we just give Anne a round of applause? I love my costume designers. So talk about coming into season 2, and because the show jumps 5 years ahead, how did that help you in terms of approaching the costumes for the show?
It was a great challenge. It was presented as this is 5 years later. Season 1 was more of a road show with Joel and Ellie going from one QZ to the next. And now we're in Jackson. And Jackson is a functioning community. And it's not as crazy and harrowing as the QZs are. So we wanted to show the Jackson community thriving and just living their lives. And so it was all about adding a little bit of color in there and breaking everything down very kindly and lovingly, something we called the Jackson patina we used on all of the clothes, which was a really lovely golden overdye. So everything got touched, everything got broken down, but we didn't want it to be completely ragged and torn apart. We wanted it to look like people are taking care of their clothes there.
As I said earlier, everybody here is going to revisit episode 2, but just as a testament to your work, I'm going to give you some numbers. So and did 579 total fittings for episode 2. There were 3,800 garments through breakdown. 191 infected costumes appeared on camera, which included 1,000 costumes that went through breakdown.
Yeah.
Neil, I'm looking at you because what is that like? You know, talk about working with Anne and hearing those numbers and.
Well, I remember the first time we walked into your warehouse. It's hard to describe. It's like it just goes on forever, and you see like racks and clothes, and Anne has this incredible team that not only like puts all these costumes together, but they have a whole process of how they break it down. It's almost like a factor line if it goes. And you see these people just meticulously, like just lovingly putting all this distress and blood stains and all this stuff. And then there was a really cool collaboration with the Barry Gower's team of like prosthetics. This season, we really wanted to show more integration between the cordyceps and the infection and the clothing. So you see it break through the clothes, and then the fungus and the fuzz and all that stuff is growing all the clothes. And that was really just cool to watch. So I actually loved visiting there and just like geeking out on Ellie's sneakers. And then I know the story of how you gave Bella the sneakers so she could write on them and make them very personal. And now we feature them at Naughty Dog, like Cecil sent them to us.
I love that.
Wait, does everybody know the sneaker story? No, okay. Do you want to? You've got to tell the story.
Okay, so when I was doing my research for season 2, I found a 15-hour playthrough, and so I haven't played the game.
A short playthrough.
I feel like I played
run.
the game, and one of the things that I was always obsessed with were the doodles in Ellie's journal, and I would always stop the game and look at what was being doodled in her journal. And so I pitched this idea to Craig and Neil about what if Ellie's also doodling on her clothes, maybe on her sneakers like most teenagers would do. So they were completely on board with this idea, and I gave Bella a pair of the Converse. They spent a month just sort of doing all of these wonderful doodles, and I got them back and was blown away by what was on them. And I actually never really asked Bella what some of it meant because I felt it was between Ellie and Bella. And you might not see it in the show, but Bella knew they were there. And that was what was important about having the doodles on the sneakers.
There you go. Ksenia, this is for you. Talk about, you worked on season 1. What were the conversations that you had with Craig and Neil about the visual language for season 2 and what was going to be different this time?
I think overall, if you do season 2 of anything, you kind of want to make it slightly better than with the previous season. And I think for this season was very exciting that I think the cinematography and the visual language kind of grows together with the characters. And that was a very, it was a very big question. How do we support with the camera work, with lighting, with composition, the journey which is happening with Ellie? And of course, there are a lot of new storylines and there are a lot of new characters, and also we bring characters to a lot of new environments, which kind of dictate the color and, lighting solutions and a lot of new textures too, which was also very interesting. I think overall, what was amazing talking with Craig and Neil about this, that overall it feels like we had a freedom of being brave to try things. And it resulted in a lot of beautiful sequences, like, the museum sequence in episode 6, or I really like the basement, red basement in episode 5, like something what we haven't experienced in season 1, but so visually impactful in season 2 and like supporting the storytelling and characters.
Can I say something else nice about you?
Absolutely not.
Okay. Well, as you know, I don't care what you think. So, Ksenia is also, quietly, without a lot of people talking about it, the best camera operator I have ever worked with. And I'm old as shit, and I've been around a long time. And I've met a lot of camera operators, and cinematographers are sort of notoriously bad camera operators. Ksenia is incredible, and it is a very physical show. We are handheld, and we're asking people to move backwards while crouching across a forest bed with roots and rocks, and She is just unbelievable. I so much of what I think we benefit from as directors, and all of our directors benefit from, is the fact that Ksenia is both lighting and also driving the frame, because the camera operators are so important. And obviously we have a great team, around her. We have these amazing other camera operators because I love a lot of cameras. That's my thing. But she's just absolutely flawless at that job. See? Right?
Unbelievable.
Yeah. Screw you.
Incredible. Timothy, I am staring at you right now as editor of the series. I want you to talk about cutting Joel's death and getting those dailies, and really it's, everybody was talking about it when it aired, and we're still talking about it, but what was important to you in cutting that moment?
Well, thank you. It was crazy. Also, I'm so lucky as the editor of the show, because everything you're hearing about all of these incredible collaborators, I'm the beneficiary of that. I get it all. I get to see everything that they do, and then I'm, of course, terrified and honored to be able to put that on screen and to craft it and to bring up the architecture. But that specific scene, I did 5 times before I was ready to show it to MacAulay, the director, because it was never good enough for me. And I kept seeing iterations of different performances in Bella Ramsey, and little tiny nuances that Pedro Pascal was doing, little things where he'd lift a finger to let Bella know, I'm here, and let the audience know, I'm here. I'm not just beaten to a pulp. And that gives the audience the sense that this is really a connected moment. So it was really important for me to make sure you felt the visceral feeling of not just seeing the person who you love, who's being beaten, but to feel the distance between how you see that person, and that there's nothing you can do. And one of the coolest things that happened when Craig and I worked on it was, initially we intended to never show the stab. It was not part of the design, and it was going to be off camera, which we've done in the past. And then we actually did find a shot where Pedro actually dropped his hand just slightly, and almost like the muscles stopped. And then we looked at that and said, can we actually show this? And wouldn't it be more impactful for the first time to show the death of a character from another character's point of view? And of course, we do what we always do. We say, Alex, can you come in and can we make this work? Because it wasn't designed for that. Of course, Caitlin stopped at a certain point, because obviously you can't do that. It would be very bad.
You can't kill Pedro Pascal.
Very, very bad. But ultimately, that's the kind of thing that I love about this show so much, is just the feeling that you can sit with these characters as well. So when Ellie is crawling over to dead Joel at the end, it was heartbreaking to me, and it was important to show restraint and to not edit when she's crawling over at all, because you don't need to. You want the audience to be viscerally connected to that character, and to experience what that character is experiencing. So it still is one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. The Battle of Jackson was nothing in comparison to that. So.
Well, you said it took you 5 attempts to do that. How long did you spend cutting that sequence?
Well, I mean, ultimately it took about 8 months in the end, but I spent about a week. I just kept, every day I'd start over, and I'd say certain cornerstones were emerging. I'm like, all right, that's feeling correct. But I just kept watching Bella's performance, because there were 9 takes, and every single one had a different sort of character to it, and I found different things in each one of them. And when we were crafting it with Craig, it was exciting to be able to actually go, what if we change Bella's strategy? What if we show how it's not just a scream fest, but it's I'm going to scream and try and get him to get up, to get off that ground, and then if that doesn't work, so now I'm going to sort of get quiet and see if that works, and then at the end I'm going to change my strategy entirely and not even focus on Joel, and now focus entirely on Abby and plead. So that's my last chance. So being able to sort of craft that through the multiple takes that Bella did. And I'm telling you, each one of them was heartbreaking. And at the end of every single take, as Bella Ramsey is so good at doing, she will just turn to the camera, tears falling down her face, and just go. And that's what honestly, it got me through it.
I love that. Neil, what was your reaction seeing Tim's work and that scene?
You know, there's a few moments in this season that we just had to get right. You know, this is the inciting incidents. Everything comes off of this. And I loved all those choices. I loved the performances. I felt like Pedro and Bella captured that loss, that grief. And then it was coupled with Caitlin's incredible monologue. And just she really sold why someone would go to that extent to see it. So I talk about this a lot, but it's such a strange feeling, you know, having gone through it already one time in the video game, and then to see it here and to see it done justice by all these incredible people so well. It's incredibly moving. And then my favorite part is then seeing everybody back at Naughty Dog. Naughty Dog is the company that made the game where I work day to day, seeing their reaction to it and how much they were moved by it, by another version of their own work. And it just speaks to the quality and the craft that went into it.
And David, your score this episode, I mean, through the whole season is great, but like in this episode, we go from like, you know, heart racing action, the battle, to that quiet moment. Like, talk about, you know, your approach to this and what was in your toolbox as far as instruments.
Well, on this show, I have the huge honor of working alongside Gustavo Santaolla, who shepherded the musical identity of this franchise from the video game to the show. So a lot of my toolbox is actually informed by what he's done. My scenes are usually, you know, different forms of panic attacks, as it happens in episode 2 quite a lot. But, you know, we draw from the same palette. I'm a fan of his from some of the films he's done, let alone Last of Us. And I wanted to come to this show with a respect for the work that he's done and also the palette that he's created. So I like to think that like we stumbled upon the same pawn shop in the post-apocalypse, and we have the same exact instruments, a lot of guitars and banjos and bowed nastiness, but the approach is often different. And the Battle of Jackson is a good example of what I like to say, that on this show there's usually a more is more time and a less is more time. And the Battle of Jackson was definitely more is more. I remember, you know, Craig early on saying, like, how do we start this at like a 9 or a 10 and just keep ramping up through the whole episode? And then once we get to Joel's death, it was kind of the opposite, where the first version started a little busier, and Craig said, like, how do we strip this back? How do we do less? How do we say less? And actually, you'll see in the end scene, there's sort of big gaps of silence put in, and it makes it so much more effective. And it's funny now to hear Tim talk about all the little nuances, and you know, me thinking I was imagining seeing all those things. But it really is amazing working on a show like this where everything is considered, and that goes to the music as well. Like, when are we using Gustavo's themes? When are we doing something new? What are the sonics? You know, we really dig into the sounds. You know, is this, do the infected sound like this? Do the WLF sound like this? So I think, you know, one of the smartest things that Neil and Craig decided on was bringing over a lot of the musical identity from the show. One of the interesting things for me is, you know, a video game is a very active experience. When you're playing it, you're living it. And you know, a television show is a passive experience. And I think one of the things that they've asked me to do is try to still make it feel like an active experience, especially when it comes to big action set pieces like the Battle of Jackson. How do we make it feel like we are Ellie, or we are living that adventure? So yeah, it was definitely the highest contrast episode between really big and really sparse, and probably the one that we spent the most time trying to get the music right on.
Neil and Craig, I want to come back to you. What is it like working with this incredible group of department heads and artisans, and the collaborative process of hearing their ideas and you're like, wait, actually, no, I need you to strip that back a little bit and talk about working with them?
Well, it's not enough to be very, very good at your job, because I have worked with people who are very, very good at their job, but when you come to them and say, okay, but from my kind of mountaintop point of view, my eye in the sky point of view, I feel like this could be more like this, or this could be more like that. They don't want to do it, or they don't want to try, or they want to push back. There is a natural defensive instinct. I worked as a writer in features for a long time, so that was beaten out of me, brutally. But I appreciate that nobody here ever argues, nor do they just go, you got it. They ask questions, they want to get under the hood of it, and then they try. And you guys know I'm the first person to go, well, I was fucking wrong, clearly. I always say to Tim, like, Command Z, Tim. Let's go back to what you had. Command Z, Command Z. And that's the case with everyone, you know, like and everybody has their different way of indicating it. So like Alex, for instance, I might say, do you think it would be good if we did blank? And if he goes, yeah, then that's it, it's over. Because I can see that. Ksenia doesn't even have to get as that far. There's like her. I'm like, oh no, okay, no, because it's important for them to tell us when we're wrong. It's incredibly important, and when they do, it's incredibly important for us to know they're not saying it out of being protective of themselves. They're protecting the show, and all of them do that. I am so grateful for that, so that we can just speak freely with each other, and we're free to be wrong.
It's the best safety net in the world. As someone that hasn't been doing this for very long, I felt immediately like I'm part of a family. You know, whether it's working with Ksenia and prepping for months for like the episode I had to direct, or just talking about the cinematography in general and how we're going to achieve this like crazy space capsule sequence, to like the costumes and how we like had to jump around and really quickly be able to tell what period we're in, because we're telling the story non-linearly. So to deal with costume and prosthetics, the sets I was just gushing to Don like how incredible they were, and like we had to throw away a whole set of Dinosaur Museum. We couldn't even show it. And again, so much work went into it. You do a lot of these things. Often I talk to other showrunners of TV shows and they tell me how lucky I am that, you know, often what is built is just what you're going to shoot. And that's pretty much it. We had a 360 view of all the degree, like we built interiors that we never got into. Like it's pretty wild, like the options that we had in front of us, and it's all in service of the story. Every time we kind of went through it and asked, is it possible to take it even further? And they would say, not only that, we'll push even beyond that. So I just felt like we're constantly pushing each other. And to what Craig was saying, I have to echo that. It's like you're working with really kind people. There's so many jerks in this industry that are really talented, but you'd never want to work with again. And I would work with everyone here over and over again, given the chance.
You've mentioned it, so we have to talk about episode 6. It was such an incredible episode, so quiet compared to like the other episodes, and just like a beautiful breather moment. Ksenia, talk about shooting that and working with Dan, and because I think when we spoke, you said the set actually wasn't, or like the capsule wasn't actually as big as it should.
I mean, it's a very special episode, you know, not only for all of us, but also in the body of the story. Overall, you know, on the show like The Last of Us, which has a very grounded and very realistic look, suddenly you get the opportunity to do this kind of very magical, very beautiful, almost like surrealistically beautiful episode, which is so connected to Ellie and watching her journey. like over this last 5 years, we haven't seen her, and like living with what happened in Salt Lake City. And that particular moment you're talking about in this space museum, it's in the game, it is already striking as it is. And for sure, it was very interesting how we could replicate that for the screen and kind of, again, it's pretty hard to make it better, I need to tell you, but just like slightly push it further. And it took such a long time to figure out, like, it started with, Don building like a 3D model, printing it, like to figure out like what parts should be taken apart. And we had like, it's pretty cool. We had like a very small, like a toy we could play around and like find out the angles. And after that, they built for us like a full-size foam thing, which was exactly the size of the capsule with like all the things, all the walls we could take apart. And after that, from there, we moved to like a real thing, which still, we could take it apart, and it had like all the detail, like with all the buttons actors could push, which was absolutely, it's working on the show is incredible in a way that you always get to experience the environment, which is very rare in any sort of filmmaking. And for this particular sequence, which was also very challenging, there is a very kind of complicated pattern of lighting, very highly designed, together with the sound, which was directing us into Ellie's emotion. And what's funny, there is this very beautiful set piece of the space capsule, but the whole scene is lit like through this teeny tiny hole on the side of the wall. And but that was extremely fun to find, for sure.
There you go. Dan, I have to ask you a question since Neil brought it up. What is harder? Is it harder for you to see one of your sets that you've worked on being burnt down, or building a set and not having it shown, like Craig teased it? It's a Sophie's Choice question, I'm sorry.
What a choice.
I think the dinosaur museum hurt a little bit, I gotta admit. Like, I think Craig was a little, not that Craig's ever shy, but he was a little, he was hesitant to tell me that it wasn't going to make it in the show. But, I think that set and all the way through that space museum, I think it's one of the sets that we lean heavily into the game. And, the game's always our first point of reference, and it's done so well. And like Ksenia says, some of these things that we do, the Space Museum, for example, we're really doing it shot for shot, and there's no reason to reinvent it. So I think that set, and like I say, the music store, some of the other sets we did, we really try to stay close. And I was telling Neil earlier, one of the things I enjoyed most, especially when Neil was directing, is I would see him taking pictures, and he would be sending them to guys that worked on the game. And I in general, over the whole season, I feel a certain responsibility to the guys who did the game and to the gamers and the people that loved the game, and to get it right, in some ways for them. And so there was a number of places where we definitely leaned into that, for sure.
This is what it means to get it right. There was one day in particular where I had two people come visit me from Naughty Dog when I was directing, and I'm kind of walking them around the dinosaur museum, and then I took them by the space capsule. And I'm just kind of talking through, and I've already been there for a few days looking at that stuff, and I turned back, they have tears in their eyes, because it's stuff that they've worked on for so many years, just seeing it on the screen, and then to be standing inside of it, it's like you got teleported into the game itself. It was a very special moment.
There you go. Well, I wish I could speak to you for much longer, but we've got an episode to get to. So I want to thank you all for sharing insight into your process.